Welcome YouTube to another Ukraine war update for August 14th. In this update, we're going to go through the three major fronts in Ukraine to analyze which side is winning, which side is gaining ground, losing ground, and what exactly is happening. So let's get into it. So for our first analysis, we're going to analyze the southern front, and this we can call the Kherson front. So in this front, basically what we can see here is if we draw it out, the Ukrainian army is pushing heavily from the Mykolaiv direction toward Kherson, right? So they're pushing in this direction. They also established a bridgehead in this area over here, and they are pushing to kind of widen that bridgehead as well. Along with that, they're also pushing on the northern side in this area so they can cut off this village over here. So as you can see from this map, the Ukrainian army is definitely pushing in many different areas in the counterattack. Now this counterattack they did announce in July, early July. And basically what we see now is that really it hasn't made any gains. So really this counterattack, at least for now, has failed, right? The Russians have managed to hold the front line in this area. And by doing that, they've kind of had minimal losses. You can see maybe in this area there's a small village lost. Other than that, the Russians have actually been managing to hold their gains. One thing as well to note, and if we can draw it out, is that the Ukrainians have made some progress in weakening the Russians. So in this area over here by Kherson itself, and in Novokhovka, so this is a dam over here, they've actually damaged both these bridges to where large trucks cannot go through. So this is extremely significant. There's also a railway bridge over here that they managed to damage pretty badly. And now what the Russians are doing is in the city of Kherson itself, they're actually just using a ferry to ferry back, you know, troops and stuff like that. So the Russians have had a lot of damage to their logistics, their supply lines behind enemy lines, and they've had damages to certain command posts all along the front line themselves. So they've had a lot of damage behind the lines, primarily due to the HIMARS systems and other artillery systems, you know, constantly shelling behind the front line. So this front, what the Russians have done themselves, and if we can draw it out, give me one moment, is that they've brought in reinforcements. Some people are speculating how many reinforcements came in, but basically from the eastern front and from other areas in the south, they've brought in reinforcements. Now their total troop strength is around 25,000 in this area. So a significant amount of troops. The Ukrainians probably have double that, to be honest, on this front. But the Russians have the equipment, right? So in this case, we do have a stalemate right now, but depending on what happens, I think we're going to see a lot of shifts end of August, maybe even September in this front, in terms of the Ukrainians trying to counterattack harder and the Russians possibly countering the counterattack at some point to gain more ground if they can. So in this front, the Russians, again, they have 25,000. The Ukrainians, they probably themselves have 50,000. Again, these numbers are just, you can call educated guess right here. But the Ukrainians, even though they have more men, they have a lot less equipment in this area, although they do have multiple HIMARS in the area. So on this front, this is definitely a stalemate. All right, we're going to go to the main front of the war, and that is the Donbass front. So on this eastern front, we're going to go from the south to the north. First, we're going to go down here. This is basically the city of Donetsk itself. So if you look in this area right here, and we make some drawings, right? The Russians have been trying to push from the city of Donetsk to kind of free the city from artillery range and kind of get the war away from the capital of Donetsk. They've also been pushing this little salient right here. And the reason why they've been doing this is because they basically want to cut off this road, and they want to force the Ukrainians, and if we can draw what their plans are, they want to force the Ukrainians to retreat backwards once they cut off the road. So that's basically what they've been doing in this front, and really it's been complete stalemate in this front. The armies have barely moved since March, to be honest. The armies have barely moved. These are almost the same battle lines as 2014. So that's basically for the southernmost part of this front. If we go a little bit further north, basically Bakhmut is the main objective for the Russians. So if we're going to draw it out how they're attacking, what they tried to do initially, and we're just going to draw this out pretty well here. They try to basically attack north of Bakhmut and then south of Bakhmut. And that's still what they're trying to do right here, while keeping, you know, some assaults going on in the center of this front. So what they're trying to do in their plans is that they want to encircle the city, cut off this road, and then they want to south of it cut off this road as well, and basically pincer the city and attack it from two sides. This is basically classical military theory. This is as old as Hannibal Barca, the Greeks themselves. This is old classic military strategy, and in this case, I mean, if they were more efficient, this would work. Every army uses this tactic of encirclement, and for the Russians, if they had better troops, they'd be more successful, but their troops are low quality. In this area, they've been reported to use the private military group Wagner to conduct their assaults. And with mercenaries are there for the money, right? They're not really going to risk their lives for this endeavor, so they're probably seeing slow progress and not really much from these mercenaries, to be honest. So what have the Ukrainians been doing in Bakhmut themselves? So let's draw it out. The Ukrainians have made a strong front line at this M103 highway. They've basically held the line everywhere that they can, right? They were pushed back from this Myronovsky area, but they basically recuperated, and then they stabilized the front line, most likely using reserves to plug that gap with minimal losses. The Ukrainians are holding them pretty well in this Bakhmut area, and this is basically another stalemate. The Russians are making extremely small gains. Maybe in a week they'll capture one village, but at tons of casualties. So this is a front that's overall in stalemate. Up here in the north of the city of Seversk, right, basically the Ukrainians have successfully conducted defensive operations along this entire front. With the retreat from Lysychansk, what they've been able to do is they've been able to pull back and get a basically better line of defense. So they most likely have multiple lines of defense in this area right here, right? And then they also have another line most likely around the main cities of Slovansk and Kramatorsk over here. So on this front, as you can see, the Ukrainians have fought them to an effective standstill, and in this front the Russians are making smaller gains here and there, but overall it's not really large change. And if you go to the artillery map, what we can see here is that there's actually been a slowdown of shelling. Now this could be because the Russians are losing ammunition dumps, running out of ammunition. It could be because they're using different tactics. It could just be that this map is not picking up a lot of the artillery, which that could also be a possibility. But from what it seems like, the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense and other sources, the shelling has significantly slackened from what it was. So in this case, if that is true, the Russians are basically going to have zero chance of actually conquering this ground, because artillery is their main weapon of war, right? It's the only weapon that works for them. It's the only way they can kind of advance. So if they can't use their artillery, this is basically going to become a disaster for them. All right, to round out this front, we're going to basically go over the Izium sector. So in this sector, if we look, what basically has been happening, and I'll draw what the Russians have been doing, is that they initially tried in May and June, that when they crossed the river here, they initially tried to take the city of Borodichyne. They were completely pushed back from that sector. They tried to, go down this highway and maybe secure some villages. They were completely cut off from that sector, right? They tried this sector, and they basically tried to expand in all directions. So what the Ukrainians do? Well, they actually put their best airborne units in this area because it was a critical area. And what they did is they completely stymied them, right? So they stymied them, and not only that, but recently they counterattacked, and they took back the city of Borodichyne and Dolna. They counterattacked in this area, took a little bit of ground, counterattacked here, all along the front, and then not only did they counterattack, but they started taking out supply depots in Izium and multiple other areas to lessen the effect of Russian artillery shelling. So in this front, there's been complete stalemate. As of recent, there haven't been really that many big moves. This has been stalemate for a couple of weeks now, so no real big moves besides the small Ukrainian counterattack in the Izium front. All right, so we're going to move on to the Kharkiv front. So on the Kharkiv front, basically, if we draw it out, just like the other ones, the Ukrainians have set up strong defensive positions all around the city of Kharkiv, right? And they've basically been holding the Russians and trying to counterattack where they can. Here, if you look, we're going to draw out what the Russians have been doing. The Russians have basically just been trying to counterattack here and there. They did not actually go for the city because they knew they did not have enough forces to actually basically take the city. The city, I believe, may have 1 million people. I'm not really sure what the pre-war population is, but I believe it was 1 million or more people. So for the Russians to undertake that type of operation, they would have to have, just in this sector alone, maybe like 100,000 troops, right? Minimum, just to take that. just to control this entire area, this city, and actually take the city. So not only the Russians have not have that amount of troops, but basically their troops aren't even well trained, so they're probably not really going to be taking Kharkiv unless the Ukrainian government collapses. I don't think they'll take the city, because the Ukrainians can literally just retreat in the city and hold out for indefinitely if it came to that point. So the Russians have basically been trying to just establish their own defensive line. What this does right here when they establish this defensive line is it basically safeguards this little highway over here, their lines of communication and their lines of logistics, and it keeps that logistic corridor open and away from shelling. So again, in this case, this front is basically just a complete stalemate. One unbiased information source that I wanted to introduce the audience to is the Institute for the Study of War. So in this institute, basically what they do is they try to take as much unbiased position as they can, but they try to take an unbiased opinion on how the war is going and just present you with strategically what's happening in the wars. For the most part, they try not to put their opinions in. They try to give you basically what the facts are using different sources. For this Institute of War, if you look here, they have an assessment for August 13th. This is basically yesterday, and they're going to come out with today's assessment later in the day. So let's see what they actually have to say. So for one, Ukrainian forces are continuing efforts to disrupt Russian ground lines of communication and support Russian forces on the right bank of the Dnieper River. That's basically echoing what we talked about in Kherson, where they cut off the bridges and basically denied the Russians access to moving their equipment easily at Kherson fronts. If you read, they do have more detail about that. They also have another paragraph saying Russian forces may be reprioritizing advances in northern Donetsk Oblast in order to draw attention from Ukrainian counter-offensive actions in southern Ukraine. So what does that mean? That basically means that they're trying to attack more in the east so that they can drive Ukrainian reserves to the east of Ukraine where they want to fight. So in this case, very astute representation here, and they're going to give you their key takeaways here. So from analyzing these three fronts, we can see that basically the war is in a complete stalemate phase. What's happening right now? Well, both armies are refitting. They're trying to train more troops, and they're trying to bring more men into the field, get more ammunition, refit their equipment, wait for the factories and the foreign powers to send more equipment, and basically get ready for possibly a bigger showdown in late August or September right here. As you can see from the artillery map, there is sporadic artillery here and there. Some of this is just wildfires themselves, but they are fighting artillery dueler here. But I'm guessing that at the end of August, possibly September, we're going to see a move from either the Ukrainians counterattacking. Most likely, if we draw it out, they'll be counterattacking in the south, or we'll see Russia mobilize enough forces and they'll be counterattacking from this eastern area. So we're going to see one of those two play out, and I'm guessing whichever attack starts first, so it's either a larger counterattack in the south or a large counterattack in the east, whichever one starts first, that one is going to basically get the other side to respond first. So if we get an attack in the east, I think that what the Ukrainians are going to do is they're going to mobilize reserves from the south, and they're going to go to meet them. Similarly, if we get an attack, this is basically already happened, to be honest, but if we get a larger attack in the south, the Russians are going to pull more men. They're basically going to pull those men south so that they can kind of lock that area down. So in this case, I think at the end of August, we're probably going to see some even larger battles, and I'm not sure if the front will move, to be honest, because in this war, what we've seen is that defensive technology has taken the head, right? The SAM batteries from both sides basically make it so that no one can fly aircraft. The drones are basically making it so that any offensive is easily discovered, and artillery is basically making it a World War I situation where troops out in the open are going to get mowed down pretty easily. So again, for August 14th, we have stalemate in Ukraine. So for more Ukraine war updates and battlefield analysis, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for watching.